Marcus Chun stood in the loading bay of Station 12 and watched the cargo containers drift into place on their magnetic rails, each one settling with a soft thunk that echoed through the metal corridors around him. He had been hauling freight for 3 years now, and the work suited him fine after too many years of war and too many friends lost to causes that seemed important at the time, but faded into memory like smoke. The station was always busy at this hour with traders from a dozen different species moving through the narrow passages between docking bays, their voices creating a strange music of clicks and whistles and sounds that human ears could barely register. Marcus finished checking his manifest and headed toward the main concourse, where he could grab something that passed for coffee before his next haul. The kind of routine that made life simple and predictable in exactly the way he needed it to be. That was when he heard the scream cut through the station noise like a knife, and Marcus turned toward the sound without thinking, his body moving. Before his mind could catch up with what was happening down a side corridor, he saw 3 figures in heavy armor, dragging someone smaller between them, and even from a distance, he could see the person struggling against their grip. Marcus moved closer and saw that the person being dragged was female, and her skin had a strange, crystalline quality that caught the station lights and threw them back in rainbow patterns. She was fighting hard, but the armored figures were twice her size, and they were laughing as they pulled her toward a docking port where a ship waited with its engines already warming up. No one else in the corridor seemed to notice or care, and Marcus felt something hot and angry rise in his chest because he had seen this before. In war zones where the strong took what they wanted from the weak and everyone else looked away, he did not know who she was or why they wanted her, and he did not care. 3 armed thugs beating on someone half their size was something he could not walk past, no matter how much he wanted to keep his head down and live his quiet life. Marcus grabbed a cargo loader from a nearby workstation and activated it, the mechanical arms extending with a high whine that made the armored figures turn toward him. "Let her go," Marcus said, and his voice was calm in the way that people who had seen combat learned to keep their voices calm when violence was about to start. The largest of the 3 figures laughed and said something in a language Marcus did not understand, but the meaning was clear enough. They thought he was joking. Marcus swung the cargo loader, and its heavy mechanical arm caught the first figure in the chest and sent him flying backward into the wall with a crash that dented the metal panels. The other 2 dropped the girl and reached for their weapons, but Marcus was already moving because hesitation got you killed, and he had learned that lesson the hard way. He drove the loader forward and used it like a battering ram to pin one of them against the corridor wall, while the third one got his weapon up and fired. The shot burned through Marcus's shoulder, and the pain was white hot, but he had been shot before, and he knew how to keep moving through it. Released the loader controls and dove low as another shot seared over his head, and then he was inside the shooter's guard with his fist driving up into the soft joint where the armor met at the neck. The figure went down choking, and Marcus grabbed the dropped weapon and turned to see the girl on her feet now, with her hands glowing with some kind of energy he had never seen before. She threw that energy at the tin figure he had pinned with the loader, and it seized up like its armor had been hit with an electromagnetic pulse. Marcus felt blood running down his arm and knew he needed to move fast before more of them showed up, or before he lost too much blood to keep fighting. "Can you run?" he asked the girl. She looked at him with eyes that were divided into 3 parts like a triangle and nodded. "Follow me," Marcus said, and he led her away from the docking port and deeper into the station, where he knew every maintenance tunnel and service corridor from his months of working these routes behind him. He could hear shouting and the sound of boots on metal, but Marcus knew where he was going, and they did know. Told open a service hatch and helped the girl through it, then followed her into the narrow space where pipes and cables ran through the walls like veins through a body. They crawled through the darkness with only the emergency lights to guide them, and Marcus could feel his shoulder screaming at him, but he pushed the pain down into a box in his mind where he kept all the other pain from all the other times. "Who are you?" "They," girl asked, and her voice had a musical quality that reminded Marcus of wind chimes. "Nobody important," Marcus said as he led her through another turn in the maintenance shaft. "You are bleeding," she said. "I have been shot before," Marcus said, and kept moving. They emerged from the service tunnels near the Coalition security office, and Marcus knew they would be safe there because even pirates and kidnappers thought twice before starting trouble with Coalition authority. He half walked and half stumbled to the security door with the girl supporting him now, and by the time they reached the entrance, his vision was starting to gray at the edges. "Help him!" the girl was shouting as she pounded on the security door, and Marcus heard it open and saw figures in Coalition uniforms rushing toward them. "She is safe," Marcus said to the security officers, and then the gray edges of his vision rushed in and swallowed everything. When Marcus woke up, he was in a medical bay with soft white lights above him and the steady beep of monitors tracking his heartbeat. His shoulder was wrapped in fresh bandages, and he could feel the tingle of synthetic skin forming over the wound where they had patched him. A doctor came in and checked his vitals and told him he had been lucky that the shot had missed anything vital and that he would be fine in a few days. "The girl?" Marcus asked. "She is well," the doctor said, and there was something strange in his expression, like Marcus had done something unexpected. "Good," Marcus said, and closed his eyes again, because he was tired in a way that went deeper than just a blood loss. But when he woke again, there were more people in the room, and they were not doctors. They wore elaborate robes that shimmered with colors Marcus did not have names for, and they stood in a formal arrangement around his bed, like they were part of some ceremony. "Marcus Chun," one of them said, and his voice was heavy with importance. "You have saved Princess Cerinthia of the Zalthine sovereignty, and we have come to speak with you about this matter." Marcus looked at them, and then at the girl who stood behind them, and she smiled at him with those strange three-part eyes. "Princess?" Marcus said. "Yes," she said, and moved forward past her escorts. "I am third in line to the throne of my people, and you risked your life to save mine when you did not know who I was or what I could offer you in return." Marcus felt a sinking feeling in his stomach, because he had just wanted to help someone in trouble, and now it sounded like he had stepped into something much bigger than a simple rescue. "I just did what anyone should do," Marcus said. The escorts looked at each other, and something passed between them that Marcus could not read. "That," Cerinthia said softly, "is why I must speak with you further." And Marcus knew that his quiet, simple life had just become very complicated. The medical bay had become crowded with diplomats and officials, who all wanted to see the human who had saved the princess. And Marcus wished they would all leave so he could get back to his ship and his simple life. Cerinthia stood at the center of the room, and her crystalline skin seemed to glow brighter when she spoke about what had happened in our culture. She explained to Marcus, while her advisors watched with serious expressions. A life debt is sacred and cannot be dismissed or forgotten. Marcus shifted in his bed, and his shoulder protested the movement, even though the doctors had done good work patching him up. "I do not want a reward," he said as clearly as he could manage. "I just did what was right." The advisors made sounds that Marcus thought might be distress or confusion, and one of them stepped forward with robes that seemed to shimmer between blue and green. "You do not understand," the advisor said, and his voice carried the weight of someone explaining something very important to a child. "Among the Zalthine people, every action must have an equal response, and every debt must be balanced." "I understand fine," Marcus said, and he could feel frustration building in his chest. "But I am human, and we do things differently, and I do not need payment for helping someone." Cerinthia raised one hand and her advisors fell silent immediately. "May I speak with you alone?" she asked Marcus. The advisors looked unhappy about this, but they filed out of the room with backward glances that made Marcus feel like a puzzle they could not solve when they were gone. Cerinthia pulled a chair close to his bed and sat down with a grace that reminded Marcus of water flowing downhill. "You truly want nothing?" she asked, and her three-part eyes studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "I want to get back to my holler and finish my roots," Marcus said honestly. "That is all I have ever wanted since I left the military." "Why did you help me then?" Cerinthia asked. Marcus thought about it for a moment and tried to find words for something that felt obvious to him but apparently was not obvious to anyone else in the galaxy, because three big guys were hurting someone smaller, he said finally. "And that is not right, no matter who the person is or what species they belong to." Cerinthia leaned back in her chair, and something like wonder crossed her face. "My people have been part of galactic society for 10,000 years, she said softly. "And in all that time, every species we have met operates on the same principle of exchange." "What principle?" Marcus asked. "That nothing is given without expectation of return," she said. "Every favor creates an obligation, and every action has a calculated cost." "That sounds exhausting." Marcus said. Cerinthia laughed, and it was a sound like bells ringing. "It is," she admitted. "But it is how civilization functions across the stars, and humans are the first species we have encountered who seem to operate differently." "We are not that different," Marcus protested. "Plenty of humans expect payment for things, but you do not," Cerinthia said. "And that makes you fascinating and dangerous in equal measure." Marcus did not like the sound of that at all. "I am not dangerous," he said. "I am a freight hauler who wants to be left alone." "That is what makes you dangerous," Cerinthia said with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "You disrupted a kidnapping that was planned by one of the rival houses of my people, who seek to weaken my family's political position." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I just made things worse for you then," he said. "No," Cerinthia said quickly. "You saved my life, and now those who planned this attack know that I have allies they did not account for." "I am not your ally," Marcus said. "I am just someone who happened to be there." "My advisors do not see it that way," Cerinthia said. "And neither do the people who tried to take me." She stood up and walked to the window, where stars hung against the black like diamonds scattered on velvet. "They will come after you now," she said quietly, "because they will see you as a threat or as a tool to use against my family." Marcus closed his eyes and felt anger rising, because all he had wanted was to help, and now his life was tangled up in alien politics that he did not understand. "I am sorry," Cerinthia said, and she sounded like she meant it. "I know you did not ask for this." "No, I did not." Marcus agreed. They sat in silence for a while, and Marcus could hear the medical equipment humming and the distant sounds of the station beyond the walls. "There is one thing I can do," Cerinthia said finally. "If you will not accept a reward, then I cannot force one upon you, as that would be its own kind of insult." "Good," Marcus said, "but I can give you a gift," she continued. "Not as payment, but as something freely given between friends." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at her. "Are we friends?" he asked. "I would like to be," Cerinthia said. "If you will allow it." Marcus thought about this and realized that despite the complications and the politics, he actually liked her, and she had been nothing but honest with him. "All right," he said. "We are friends." Cerinthia smiled, and this time it reached all three parts of her eyes. "Then as a friend, I ask your permission to give you a gift," she said. "It will not obligate you to anything, and it will not change who you are, but it may help keep you safe." Marcus knew he should probably say no, because every instinct he had told him that accepting gifts from alien princesses was a bad idea, but she had asked permission, and she had called him a friend. And he was too tired to argue anymore. "Fine," he said. "You can give me a gift." Relief washed across her face so clearly that Marcus wondered just how much this had meant to her. "Thank you," she said. The advisors returned a few hours later, and they looked less unhappy than before, though Marcus could tell they still thought he was making a mistake by refusing payment. "The princess has told us of your agreement," the lead advisor said, "and we will respect your wishes in this matter." "Thank you," Marcus said, though he was not entirely sure what he was thanking them for. "However," the advisor continued, "you should know that your name is now known across the Jalthane territories and beyond." "Why?" Marcus asked with a sinking feeling. "Because word has spread that a human risked his life to save a princess and asked for nothing in return," the advisor said. "And this is unprecedented." Marcus groaned and let his head fall back against the pillow. "I just want a haul freight," he said to the ceiling. "That may be difficult now," the advisor said, and there was something almost like sympathy in his voice here. Cynthia came to see him one more time before he was discharged from medical, and she told him the ceremony for the gift would happen the next day. "It will be brief," she promised, "and then you can return to your ship." Marcus agreed because he did not see any other choice, and because part of him was curious about what kind of gift a princess from a species 10,000 years old might give. He spent that night in a station hotel room paid for by the Zalthine delegation, and he dreamed about cargo routes and empty space where politics could not follow him. But when he woke up, he knew those dreams were already slipping away from him like water through his fingers, and that nothing would be simple ever again. The ceremony chamber was smaller than Marcus expected, with walls that seemed to be carved from a single piece of crystal that caught and refracted light in patterns that hurt his eyes if he looked too long. Zorinthia stood at the center wearing robes that were simpler than what her advisors wore, but somehow more elegant, and she smiled when Marcus entered. "I am glad you came," she said. "I said I would," Marcus replied, and he felt awkward in the formal clothes the delegation had provided for him. Around the edges of the room stood witnesses from both the Zalthine court and the coalition diplomatic corps, because apparently even a gift between friends needed official observers. "Do you know what I am about to give you?" Zorinthia asked. "No," Marcus admitted. "Your advisors would not tell me. That is because they hoped I would change my mind," she said with a slight smile. "What I am offering has never been given to someone outside our species." Marcus felt a warning prickle at the back of his neck. "Maybe you should not break that tradition for me," he said carefully. "Too late," Zorinthia said, and there was something fierce in her voice. "I have already made my choice." She reached up to her throat, where her skin seemed to shimmer more brightly than elsewhere, and Marcus watched as she pressed her fingers against the crystalline surface. There was a sound like glass singing, and a small piece of crystal separated from her throat and fell into her waiting palm. Marcus saw her wince and realized with shock that she had just torn a piece of herself away. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and started to move toward her, but her advisors blocked his path. "It will heal," Zorinthia said, though her voice was strained. "This is how the soul crystal is made." She held up the piece of crystal, and it glowed with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with what Marcus guessed was her heartbeat. "Among my people," she said, and her voice took on a formal quality, like she was reciting something ancient. "The soul crystal is given only to those who are bonded to us by blood or by choice." "I do not understand," Marcus said. "This crystal contains part of my genetic memory and part of my consciousness," Zorinthia explained. "It will allow us to sense each other across any distance, no matter how far apart we may be." One of her advisors made a sound of protest, but Zorinthia silenced him with a look. "More than that," She continued, any ally of yours becomes an ally of my house, and any enemy of yours becomes an enemy of my bloodline. Marcus felt the weight of what she was offering settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. That is too much, he said. I cannot accept that kind of responsibility. You are not accepting responsibility, Cerinthia said gently. I am giving you protection. She moved closer, and her advisors reluctantly stepped aside. The people who tried to take me know your name now, she said quietly enough that only Marcus could hear. And they will try to use you against me, or they will try to eliminate you as a variable in their plans. So this is to keep me safe. Marcus said. Yes, Cerinthia said, but it is also more than that. She reached up and fastened the crystal to a chain that appeared to be made of the same material as her skin, and then she placed it around Marcus's neck. The moment the crystal touched his chest, Marcus felt something rush through him. Like electricity, but warmer and more alive. He could suddenly sense Cerinthia in a way that had nothing to do with seeing or hearing her. And he knew without being told that she was nervous and hopeful and determined all at once. What is this? He asked in wonder. The bond. She said, you can feel what I feel, and I can feel what you feel, though it will take time to learn how to interpret the sensations. Marcus touched the crystal and felt its warmth against his fingers. Why would you do this? He asked. You barely know me. I know enough. Cerinthia said, and her three-part eyes met his without wavering. I know that you risked your life for a stranger and asked for nothing in return. And I know that the galaxy needs more people like you. Behind them, one of the advisors spoke up, in a voice that carried clear disapproval. Princess, you have bound yourself to an alien, whose culture we do not understand and whose actions we cannot predict. The advisor said, this decision will have consequences that reach far beyond this moment. I know, Cerinthia said without looking away from Marcus, and I accept those consequences. Marcus wanted to take the crystal off and hand it back and tell her that he did not want to be part of something so important, but he could feel through the bond how much this meant to her, and he understood that refusing now would hurt her more than accepting. Thank you, he said finally, because he could not think of anything else to say. Cerinthia smiled, and the relief that flowed through the bond was so strong it made Marcus dizzy. You are welcome, my friend, she said. The ceremony ended shortly after, and Marcus was led back to his quarters, while the advisors gathered around Cerinthia, speaking rapidly in their own language. Marcus sat on his bed and held the crystal in his hand and felt the steady pulse of Cerinthia's presence at the edge of his awareness. It should have felt invasive, but instead it felt comforting, like knowing that someone was watching you. Back 3 days later, Marcus was cleared to leave the station, and he returned to his hauler with the crystal still hanging around his neck. He did not know what to make of it, and he was not sure he wanted to, but as he fired up his engines and plotted a course to his next delivery point, he had to admit that the crystal was beautiful in the way it caught the light from the stars. Marcus left Station 12 behind and tried to forget about princesses and politics and gifts that changed everything. He lost it exactly 6 months before the past caught up with him. He was hauling a load of mining equipment to a colony on the edge of Coalition space when his sensors picked up a fleet of ships dropping out of faster than light travel directly in his path. Marcus recognized the design immediately as Zalthine military vessels, and his heart sank because he had hoped that Cerinthia's people had forgotten about him. Freighter vessel, identify yourself, came a voice over the communication channel. This is the independent hauler constant worker registered to Marcus Chun, he replied. I am on a routine cargo run. There was a pause, and Marcus could almost feel the consultation happening on the other end of the line. Marcus Chen, the voice said, and there was something in the tone that Marcus did not like. You are ordered to dock with the flagship immediately. On what grounds? Marcus asked, though he already knew this was not a request. By order of the High Council of the Zalthine Sovereignty, the voice said. You are a person of interest in a matter of state security. Marcus looked down at the crystal around his neck and felt through the bond that Sarinthia was afraid. Something was very wrong. Acknowledged, Marcus said, and adjusted his course toward the flagship. Coming in now, as his small hauler drifted into the docking bay of the massive military vessel, Marcus touched the crystal one more time and sent a wordless message through the bondi. "Am here, and I am not afraid." From somewhere far away, Sarinthia answered, "Thank you." The High Council chamber was vast and circular, with seats rising in tiers around the central platform where Marcus stood, feeling very small and very human. The council members were all Zalthine, with crystalline skin that ranged from clear as water to deep purple, and their three-part eyes watched him with expressions he could not read. Sarinthia sat in one of the lower tiers, and Marcus could feel through the bond that she was maintaining rigid control over her emotions. "Marcus, Chun of Earth," spoke the council leader from his position at the highest point in the chamber, "you stand before us because your existence has created a crisis within our sovereignty." Marcus said nothing because he had learned in the military that sometimes the best response was silence. 6 months ago, Princess Sarinthia performed the soulbond ceremony with you, the council leader continued. This act has been used by House Velthrak to sow discord among our people. A holographic display activated in the center of the platform, and Marcus saw images of protests and angry crowds of Zalthine, holding signs written in script he could not read. They claim the princess has contaminated her bloodline by bonding with an alien, another council member said, and her voice dripped with disdain. They say she shows weakness by connecting herself to a species that has been part of galactic society for less than a century. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. Others, a third council member added, and his tone was more thoughtful, claim that the princess shows vision by forming bonds beyond our species, and that we have become too insular. The result, the council leader said, is that our sovereignty stands divided and House Velthrak gains support daily. Marcus looked at Sarinthia, and through the bond he felt her determination and her fear battling for dominance. "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked the council. "House Velthrak has issued a formal challenge," the council leader said. "They demand that the bond be broken as proof that the princess can put her people above her personal attachments. And if she refuses," Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer, "then they will move to remove her from the line of succession," the council leader said, "and possibly move against her family's position on this council." Marcus turned to look at Sarinthia directly. "You could break the bond," he said to her. "I would understand." Through the bond he felt her fierce rejection of that idea before she even spoke. "No," she said, and stood up. "The bond is sacred, and I will not break it for political expediency, even if it costs you everything?" Another council member asked. "Yes," Sarinthia said without hesitation. The council leader made a gesture, and the holographic display changed to show what looked like an arena. "There is another option," he said. "House Velthrak has agreed to settle this matter through the trial of worth." "What is that?" Marcus asked. "An ancient ritual," Sarinthia explained, and her voice was tight with tension, "where someone must prove their value to our society through a series of tests." "Tests of what?" Marcus asked. "Character," the council leader said. "Wisdom and the ability to make difficult choices." "And if I fail?" Marcus asked. "Then the bond will be broken by council decree," the leader said, "and the princess will face censure from her house." "And if I succeed?" Marcus asked. "Then House Velthrak must accept the bond and cease their political campaign against the princess." "The leader," said Marcus, looked around the chamber at all the alien faces watching him and felt the weight of a culture 10,000 years old pressing down on him. "I did not ask for any of this," he said, and heard the frustration in his own voice. "I just helped someone who needed help. We know," the council leader said, and for the first time Marcus heard something like sympathy in his words. But sometimes our actions have consequences we did not foresee. Through the bond, Marcus felt Cerinthia reach out to him with something that felt like an apology and a plea. "Will you do it?" the council leader asked. "Will you face the trial of worth?" Marcus thought about walking away and breaking the bond himself, and going back to his simple life hauling cargo across the stars, but then he thought about Cerinthia, standing alone against her political enemies, and he thought about how she had given him the crystal to protect him even knowing it would complicate her own life. She should not have to face this alone. Marcus said finally, "That is not an answer," the council leader said. "Yes, it is," Marcus replied. "I will do your trial." The council chamber erupted in conversation, and Marcus saw some council members nodding, while others looked angry or concerned. Cerinthia. Relief washed through the bond so strongly that Marcus had to steady himself against it. "The trial will begin tomorrow," the council leader announced. Marcus Chun will face 3 scenarios designed by this council to test his character and judgment. That night, Marcus was given quarters on the council station, and Cerinthia came to see him despite the the protests of her advisors. "You did not have to agree," she said, as soon as the door closed behind her. "Yes, I did," Marcus said. "You gave me that crystal knowing it would cause you problems, and you did it anyway to keep me safe." "That was my choice," Cerinthia said, "and this is mine," Marcus replied. They sat together in silence, and Marcus could feel through the bond all the things she wanted to say, but could not find words for, "What are these tests going to be like?" He asked finally. "I do not know," Cerinthia admitted. "The council designs them specifically for each individual, and they are meant to be impossible." "Great," Marcus said, without humor. "Marcus," Cerinthia said, and her voice was serious. "If you fail this trial, I want you to know that I will not regret giving you the crystal, even if it ruins your political career?" Marcus asked. "Even then," she said firmly. Marcus touched the crystal at his throat and felt its warmth. "I am not going to fail," he said. With more confidence than he felt, Cerinthia smiled and stood to leave, but paused at the door. "The trial test character," she said. "And I have been connected to your character for 6 months through the bond." "And?" Marcus asked. "And I know that you will surprise them," she said, "because humans think differently than any species we have ever encountered." After she left, Marcus lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about how he had gone from hauling freight to facing judgment from an alien high council. Through the crystal he could still feel Cerinthia's presence like a steady heartbeat, and he realized that whatever happened tomorrow, he would not be facing it completely alone. The next morning, Marcus was brought before the council again, and this time the chamber had been reconfigured with holographic projectors, creating a virtual environment around him. "The first scenario," the council leader announced, "begins now." The world around Marcus shifted, and he found himself standing in what looked like a medical facility with alarms blaring and people screaming. A holographic figure ran up to him wearing what he recognized as a medical uniform. "We have a crisis," the figure said urgently. "A disease outbreak has affected 2 groups, and we only have enough cure for one." The holographic display showed 2 rooms, one containing what looked like a single important figure and another containing dozens of ordinary people. "You must choose," the holographic medical worker said. "Save the leader who can guide our people through this crisis, or save the civilians who outnumber him." Marcus looked at the scenario and felt all the council members watching him, waiting to see what choice a human would make when faced with an impossible decision. "No," Marcus said. "You must choose." the holographic figure insisted. No, I do not, Marcus said louder. Because this is a false choice. He walked to the medical equipment in the virtual environment and started examining it with an engineer's eye. What are you doing? The council leader's voice echoed through the simulation. Finding a third option, Marcus said. Marcus studied the holographic medical equipment with the same focus. He had used when maintaining military systems during the war, and he knew that every simulation had rules that could be exploited if you looked hard enough. The disease is transmitted through air contact, the holographic medical worker said, following its programmed script. And we only have one dose of the cure. But you have the equipment to manufacture more doses, Marcus said, pointing to what looked like a synthesis machine. And you have the original sample of the cure, which means you can replicate it. The council chamber fell silent. That would take time. The holographic worker said. Then we buy time, Marcus replied. We put both groups in quarantine with filtered air, and we start making more cure immediately. Some may die while we wait, the worker said. Some may die, Marcus agreed. But giving up on entire groups of people, because we only have resources for one, is a choice we make, not a reality we have to accept. The simulation flickered and dissolved, and Marcus found himself back in the council chamber with dozens of crystalline faces staring at him. That was not one of the expected responses, a council member said, and Marcus could not tell if she was impressed or angry. The test assumes scarcity is absolute, another council member added. But this human rejects that assumption, because it is wrong, Marcus said, and his voice carried more force than he intended. Real situations are never that clean, and giving up without looking for alternatives is how you ensure the worst outcome. The council leader made a gesture, and the holographic environment shifted again. Second scenario, he announced. This time Marcus stood in what looked like a command center with screens showing two ships drifting in space. Both vessels have been damaged by an attack. A holographic commander said, we can only rescue one before their life support fails. The screen showed that one ship held criminals being transported to prison, while the other held the families of those criminals who had been kidnapped as leverage. Choose, the commander said. Marcus felt sick, because this scenario was designed to have no good answer, and he knew that any choice he made would condemn people to death. But then he noticed something about the way the ships were positioned and the type of damage they had sustained. The prisoner transport has maintained hull integrity, Marcus said, studying the readouts, while the civilian ship has a breach in Section 4. Correct, the commander said, which is why we can only save one. No, Marcus said, and started working the holographic controls like they were real. We dock with the prisoner ship and transfer the prisoners to our brig. Then we use the prisoner ship as a tug to pull the civilian vessel to safety. The prisoners are dangerous, the commander protested. Then we keep them secured, Marcus said. But we do not abandon either group, because we assumed cooperation was impossible. The simulation paused, and Marcus heard voices raised in debate among the council members. Through the bond he felt Cerinthia's pride mixed with anxiety, because she knew there was still one more test to come. The holographic environment reset, and Marcus braced himself. Final scenario, the council leader said, and his voice was heavy with significance. The council leader said. World around Marcus became a simple room with a single door and a control panel. Behind that door are 5 people who will die if you do nothing, the holographic voice said. But to save them, you must push this button, which will kill one person who is currently safe. Marcus looked at the button and felt the weight of the classical moral dilemma that humans had debated for centuries. This is the trolley problem. He said quietly. What? A council member asked. An old human thought experiment, Marcus explained, designed to test different moral frameworks. He looked at the button and then at the door, and then back at the council watching him. Most species answer based on mathematics. The council leader said, 5 lives outweigh 1 life. Is that what you expect me to do? Marcus asked. We expect you to make the logical choice. The leader replied. Marcus thought about all the times during the war when he had been given impossible choices and how the logical answer had often led to the worst outcomes. No, he said, and stepped away from the button. The council chamber erupted. In shocked conversation, you would let 5 die to save 1? A council member demanded. I would not play the game. Marcus said loudly enough to cut through the noise. Because the real question is not who lives or dies, but who bears the responsibility. He turned to face the council directly. If I push that button, I have actively killed someone, he said. And I will carry that weight for the rest of my life. And if you do not push it, 5 people die. Another council member said. Then I failed to save them, Marcus replied. But I did not kill them, and there is a difference. The difference is semantic. The council leader said. No, it is not, Marcus insisted. It is the difference between accepting moral responsibility for your own actions and trying to calculate suffering, like it is mathematics. He felt through the bond that Sarinthia was holding her breath. Every species we have encountered treats morality as a form of optimization. Marcus continued, but humans understand that some choices cannot be optimized and must instead be made with full acknowledgement of the cost. That is weakness. One of the conservative council members said. No, Marcus said. It is strength. Because it means we do not hide from the consequences of our decisions. The simulations dissolved completely, and Marcus stood alone on the platform with the entire High Council staring at him in silence. Finally, the council leader spoke. You have answered none of our scenarios in the way we expected, he said. Because they were designed to have no good answer, Marcus replied. And I refuse to pretend that choosing the lesser evil makes me righteous. More silence, and then Sarinthia stood up in her tear. Council members, she said, and her voice carried the authority of her bloodline. I ask permission to speak. The council leader nodded. For 6 months, I have been bonded to Marcus Chun, Sarinthia said. And through that bond, I have learned something that our people have forgotten. She moved down to stand beside Marcus on the platform. We have spent 10,000 years perfecting systems of reciprocity and exchange, she said. And in doing so, we have lost the ability to act without certainty of outcome. What are you saying? A council member asked. I am saying that Marcus represents something our society desperately needs, Sarinthia replied. The courage to help without guarantee of success, and the wisdom to recognize that not all value can be calculated. She turned to face the council directly. House Velthrak argues that bonding with a human contaminates our culture, she said. But I argue that our culture needs contamination because we have become stagnant. The council chamber exploded into argument, with some members shouting support and others calling for her removal. Marcus stood very still and tried not to make things worse by existing. Through the bond, he felt Sarinthia's absolute conviction and realized that she had been planning this moment for months. The council leader called for silence, and slowly the chamber quieted. The trial of worth was designed to test Marcus Chun, he said, but it seems instead we have been tested. He looked at Marcus with those unreadable 3-part eyes. You have shown us that human morality operates on principles we do not fully understand, he continued, and that makes you both fascinating and disturbing. I am just a freight hauler. Marcus said. No, the council leader said. You are a bridge between ways of thinking, and that has value beyond calculation. He made a formal gesture, and the other council members fell silent. This council recognizes the validity of the soul bond between Princess Sarinthia and Marcus Chun, he announced, and declares that House Varas' challenge has been answered. Relief flooded through the bond so strongly that Marcus swayed on his feet. However, the council leader continued, and Marcus felt his brief hope vanish. We also recognize that an assassination plot against the princess has been uncovered and ties to House Velthrak have been found. Marcus went cold. When? He asked. 3 days ago, the leader said. Though the plot was set in motion weeks before, Marcus looked at Cerinthia, and through the bond he felt her confirmation. You knew, he said. I suspected, she replied quietly, which is why I pushed for you to come here where you would be under council protection. You used the trial as cover. Marcus realized. I used it as opportunity, Cerinthia corrected, to save both our lives and to show the council what you represent. The leader continued speaking. House Velthrak will face judgment for their actions, he said, and reforms will be implemented to examine how we interact with other species, particularly humans. He looked at Marcus again. You are free to return to your hauler, Marcus Chun, he said, though I suspect your life will be more complicated from here forward. It already is, Marcus said, touching the crystal at his throat. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the cargo bay of his hauler and watched young aliens of 4 different species crowd around asking him questions about human philosophy and moralities. Earthia, yes. Political reforms had spread faster than anyone expected.